Welcome back to Angie's Answers and part 2 on how to square up a backing fabric. So in part 1, we showed you how to eliminate any twisting that's happening in the backing fabric, because you always need a nice straight backing fabric to be able to put onto your long arm frame. So we've got this laid out on here, nice and flat, nice and straight. So this is folded in half from left to right and folded in half from top to bottom. But it's not the true fold in half, so I don't just take edges and fold them in half. You have to match up selvages and square them. So go back to part 1 if you're not sure what I'm talking about for that. So I've got my backing fabric laid out nice and flat. So now I want to take my quilt top and I want to lay my quilt top the same way. So I took my quilt top, I folded it in half from left to right, and I folded it in half from top to bottom, so I can lay this right on top of my backing fabric. When I have everything quartered like this, this allows me to see how much extra backing fabric I have around all 4 sides of my project. So I've got a nice amount of backing fabric here, there, and along my sides here. Always lay your quilt top on top of your backing fabric before you cut, because you can see that these layers are not even with each other here, and sometimes you just don't have enough to be able to square that and cut that off. So the next thing that you need to think about before we do anything else is, what is the pattern that I'm going to be quilting on this quilt? So as you can see, there's a cute little bee in here, sunflower, and some words, her little hexagons here. So I presented this customer with a couple choices. I do have this pattern. This is by Anne Bright. This is called Honey. So that cute little honey pot, that bee, and that little beehive. So I showed her this one, that could be an option for this quilt. If I was to quilt this pattern on this quilt, I would have to load this one direction. I would have to load it the way that I'm looking at it right now. So this would be my top left corner. I would start quilting here and quilt across. That would be the only way that I could get this pattern to match this quilt. We talked about with this quilt, there's not a whole lot of open space or background area, so you really wouldn't be able to see all of those intricacies of the patterns on this quilt, so we decided against this one. We looked at a few more patterns and we decided on this one. This is called Groot by Anne Bright, just that nice little swirl with the nice leaf. This pattern does not have a direction to it. So I could run it this way, same top left corner, and run across that way. Or we could take the project and turn it, so when it's on my frame, I would start here and quilt all the way across this way. So when you have a quilt like this, and you're doing a pattern that does not have a direction to it, you can take and choose to load either the short way on the frame or the long way on the frame. So this quilt measures 59 inches wide by 72 inches long. So if I was to decide to attach the zippers down here and load this way, then I would be quilting short rows and I would have to quilt a lot of them to finish. If I take the whole project and rotate it, so I'm putting my zippers along that side, now I'm quilting nice long rows and I don't have to quilt as many of them to finish. Before I do make that final decision, there's one more thing that I have to think about. This backing fabric does have a seam right here in the center. When we load backing fabrics onto the frame, it is a lot easier if we can keep that seam going horizontal on the frame. So the only way to keep the seam horizontal would be for me to put my zippers down here and attach this way. So I'd be quilting those short rows. If I wanted to put my zippers there, I would have to square up that side and then my seam would be vertical. So it's a choice that you have to make and a personal preference. I am comfortable loading vertical seams, so I'm okay with that. So I am going to choose to attach my zippers to that long side over there, and I'll work with the seam when I'm loading it on the frame so it doesn't get too thick. And the way that you do that is you grab on your roller bar from the bottom and push up and away from you, right on that seam, to help take up some of that tension and how thick it is. So because I'm going to attach my zippers over here, I need this to be a straight edge. So I need to square that up. So let me get my quilt top out of the way. Actually, sorry, come back. While it's on here, I want to find this center and put a pin on that quilt top there. So I'm going to find this edge here. I'm going to match up these 2 corners of my quilt top and just slide my hand over until I find that center of the quilt top. You don't have to do anything to square up your quilt tops ahead of time. we're going to use our channel locks on our frame, and that's how we're going to square the quilt top, but we'll do it on the frame. Where the backing fabric, it is important that you square it ahead of time. Then I'm going to take my backing fabric here and I'm going to bring it a little closer to me to make it easier. So I just fold that up one more time. Make sure that these edges are nice and straight and even with each other, and just do a nice smooth. Then I'm going to use my grid on my table and line that up. Then I kind of peek underneath of here and find where is that shortest layer and how much do I need to cut off. So I just kind of look under there and see if I can find that short layer there. It looks like I have to cut about a ½ inch off. So I'm going to line up on my table here, slowly cut through all those layers. The way that I make sure that I got through everything is I just pick one layer up at a time, and if I pull on this and I get one solid piece, then I know I got through that whole side. And then if I pull on this layer and I have one solid piece here, I know I got through that whole side and I didn't miss anywhere. So this shows me that this is my true centers here. This is a nice straight edge, so I can attach my zippers to this side. So I'm going to take my 2 safety pins here and I'm going to mark my 2 centers this way. Then, because I am not pinning my zippers to the selvages are also going to get pretty thick on your frame too. So I do want to take the time and cut these selvages off right now because I'm not pinning to them. If I was pinning to the zippers to the selvage, you wouldn't have to cut them off. But because I'm pinning on the cut side, I want to eliminate these selvages. So I'm going to take the backing fabric and turn it this way. And I'm going to pull that towards me again. Make sure that this is nice and flat here. Line that up on my table. And I'm just going to trim off the selvages along this side. Same thing if I pull these apart and I only have 2. That's how I know that I got all the way through. So I just trimmed just enough to get that selvage off of there. Okay, so now my backing fabric is perfectly squared. This is a nice straight piece, so I have my straight edges here that I'm going to attach my zippers to, and I have straight edges here. So now when we go to roll this on the frame, these are going to be able to stack on top of each other, and that's how I'm going to be able to keep it nice and straight on the frame. So come back for part 3, and I'm going to show you how we attach that quick zip system zipper set to this project.